I've heard a lot of questionable advice about how to read a scientific manuscript. And this might be controversial, but I disagree with most of it. So in this video, I'm going to share some of the strategies that I've heard others recommend for how to read a scientific paper, why those strategies are problematic, and what I recommend doing instead. And if we haven't met, hello, my name is Crystal Heron. I help scientists, clinicians, and professional writers communicate clearly and persuasively without losing nuance or credibility. And I'm best known for helping people write with intention and communicate with confidence. So this video will be a little different from some of my other videos where I'm giving you tips or teaching you about something. This will be more of a I'm talking to a friend type of video. And I even have a cup of one of my favorite teas in my favorite mug to help set the tone. So there's a lot of advice out there about how to read a scientific paper. But before getting to that advice, it's important to know the order of sections in a manuscript. And so original research manuscripts follow what is called the IMRaD structure, which stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. And this IMRaD structure helps to ensure that your manuscript follows a storytelling structure. And if that sounds like news to you, I have a video about the IMRaD structure and how it maps onto the 3-act structure, and I'll add a link to it in the description box in case you'd like to check it out. But basically, the IMRaD structure is set up to help you tell a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there are a lot of recommendations out there that advise you to scan or jump around different parts of the manuscript or the story in the manuscript. And so when I did a Google search, I found a variety of articles that recommended all sorts of approaches, most of which recommend starting with the title and the abstract. And I'd say that's pretty standard and what I'd recommend as well. And after that, the recommendations varied. So some recommended, let me look at my list, that you start with the discussion and then you read the introduction and then the results. And then another recommended that you start with the introduction and then you scan the headings and subheadings, and then you read the conclusions and then the figures, and then you read the whole paper. And then another one said to skim the introduction. I don't know that I would recommend that. And then review the figures and then the abstract and then the conclusions, and then you read the entire article. And then I found another one that said to read the introduction and then jump to the conclusions and then go back and read the methods and the results and then the discussion. And then another one that I found that isn't too bad recommends that you start with the introduction, although it said if needed. I can't say I agree with that. And then you look at the tables and figures, and then you read the results, and then the discussion, and then you jump back to read the abstract again, and then you read the methods, and then the limitations and future directions. So this last one isn't too bad, but you are still doing a lot of jumping around. And to me, that signals a big problem. So let me set the stage. When you read a book, you might read the title and the summary on the jacket to get a sense of what the story is about in the book or what information the book is going to share with you. And this is much like when you would read the title and abstract of a scientific paper. And in a book, you might even read the table of contents, which might be like scanning the headings and subheadings of a scientific paper, if there are really any subheadings beyond the standard IMRaD headings. And then in a book, you would read the book from start to finish. You usually don't read the conclusions or jump around the chapters or read a few paragraphs in a certain chapter and then a few paragraphs in another chapter. You start at the introduction or chapter 1, and then you read page by page, chapter by chapter until the end of the book. And if you don't, you might miss something important in the story in the book, or you might miss important information at the beginning of the book that you need to understand later in the book. Now, the same is true for watching a movie. You don't fast forward or rewind the movie to watch different segments before watching the movie all the way through. Although you might see some segments or highlights in a movie trailer, and this is much like what you might see in an abstract with highlights or segments in an abstract. So I know that a scientific paper is different from a book or a movie, and a scientific paper can certainly be dense and a lot to process. But a scientific paper still tells a story. And so to experience the full story in the manuscript and to get the right context that you need when you need it in the story, you need to read a scientific paper from beginning to end. Start with the title and abstract to get a high-level view. Then read the introduction, methods, results with the tables and figures, the discussion, and then the conclusions. Now, you might be able to scan or skip most of the methods unless you need that context or you find that you have questions as you read, such as whether the approach was sound or if you want to replicate the experiments. Or if you're an expert in the field, you might be able to read the introduction section pretty quickly, but it's still important to read the entire introduction section. And you also might want to take a second or even a third pass on the paper to take notes. And these additional passes could be skims rather than fully invested reads because you will already have the full context of the paper after reading it all the way through. And this is the opposite of a lot of advice out there that recommends that you skim the paper in several different ways and jumping around, rather than reading the paper from start to finish and then skimming as you need to. Now, I want to share that I think this jumping around advice that we hear is highlighting a huge problem in the scientific and medical literature. Authors are putting the hard work of understanding their writing and their thinking onto their readers. They are passing the responsibility of understanding onto their readers, and that's risky. Readers might misunderstand or misinterpret the information, or they might get annoyed or frustrated by the writing, which means that they will feel annoyed or frustrated by the authors, and that can damage the author's reputation or credibility. So, many papers are poorly written and are being published anyway, so readers have to take on the hard work of understanding the writing. And so readers are trying to come up with easier ways to trudge through papers that are hard to read and understand. And I believe that this has led to this weird jumping around advice that we are hearing about. But well-written papers, like well-written books, are page turners that readers don't have to try to force themselves to digest and understand. They can easily understand the information and the author's thinking and the story. And they can actually enjoy reading the paper and think highly of the authors. So I think the best way to address the problem is not to ask readers to come up with convoluted ways to read papers that already follow a well-designed story structure. Instead, what I think really needs to happen is that authors need to take on the responsibility of writing well so that readers can easily understand the story that authors want to tell or the message they want to send. And I'll be honest, that is hard work for authors. It's a lot of time and energy to ensure that your message is clear, concise, and tells a compelling story. And that's one thing that I love so much about my editing work. I love that I get to help authors share the story of their work and showcase their message in a way that readers can easily understand and even enjoy it. And then I can help to take some of that load, some of that hard work off of their plate. So if you take only one thing away from this video, I hope you'll keep in mind that the standardized structure of research manuscripts was designed to be read like a story from the beginning to the end, and that we need to write manuscripts in a way that readers can do this easily and enjoyably. Now, if you want to know more about how the IMRaD structure of research manuscripts maps onto a common story structure, I'll add a link to a video that I created at the end of this video. And I'll add a link to an article I wrote in the description box as well. And if you want to do a deeper dive into how storytelling is part of not just the overall paper, but every section, subsection, paragraph, and sentence that you write, you might want to check out my Scientific Writing Simplified course, where I dive into all of these details. I'll add a link to that in the description box as well. And I'd love to know what recommendations you've heard for how to read papers and what you think about them. I hope you'll share your thoughts in the description box. And while you're there, let me know if there's something in particular that you'd like to learn more about in an upcoming video. And if you're looking forward to what video might be coming next, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead, and I hope to see you in the next video.